My name is Kevin Grote. For those of you who have joined my calls before, I am a systems engineer and technical partner manager here with Tech Data from VMware. And this marks our very first Cadence enablement session of the third quarter. This has been a very exciting year, and Q3 is usually no exception. Q3 is when all of the fun stuff happens, right? This is when we all get to go out to San Francisco for VMworld and all sorts of cool things and new announcements and all kinds of great stuff. And with that in mind, my goal for today was for us to kind of have a wrap up, to kind of have a cohesive vision of where we are when it comes to software-defined data center and software-defined enterprise, so that we understand what we have today, what the changes that are going to be coming mean to us on a go-forward basis, how we can best leverage those and further our position as trusted advisors within our accounts. So, let's first kind of start with, why software-defined enterprise and why now? For those of you who, remember, the 80s and remember sitcoms, this for me is kind of, deviating from the norm. For those of you who, are on mute right now, I'll encourage you all to, quietly, shout norm, because it's, kind of customary, and I think it's a moral imperative at this point. But so why are we doing this? Why is software-defined enterprise so relevant today? Well, let's start with kind of one of the whiteboards that you guys know I love to do. We've got our fundamental data center. We've got our primary on-prem vision, and there it stands in all of its glowing data center-y glory. Out here, we've got what I like to call SPI computing, software, platform, and infrastructure as a service. And then, up to, finish the triangle, we've got users or consumers. But, inside of, the data center, we've understood the application of vSphere. We've understood where we are with, the fundamentals, but there's still more. We have errant compute and the ability to scale compute and storage. How do we measure and monitor compute and storage for density? How do we align things like networking? What are the right decisions for customers when it comes to this? And how do we map the correct solution to all of these different dilemmas, so that we're giving the customers not only what we think they need, but what their business needs align to. So this is very different than just saying, hey, we're going to invent a bunch of solutions, and we're just going to throw them at people and go, hey, we hope one of these fits. This is about VMware's cohesive vision, and also how you can apply that, take that out into the field with your own customers, so that you're further entrenching yourself as a trusted advisor in these relationships, not just as somebody who's trying to move the needle inside of the data center. So if we look at kind of where the technological areas and pathways have been, with IT budgets, the spend really hasn't changed for a long time. Unfortunately, the ability of IT to deliver based upon those budgets has only increased nominally. And a lot of this is through the advances that we've seen in virtualization and levels of automation. Right? But with all those advancements, we've also had less people. So it's kind of created a bit of a drag, right, in literal and figurative terms. Couple that with the fact that the expectations for business have increased far beyond the capacity and ability of IT to deliver based upon a static budget, and you get the idea that IT is kind of being dragged behind the truck, so to speak, right? We're trying to run and catch up. It's very, very difficult. And any of us that have done IT administration understand that feeling. We know that we're running as fast as we can, but it's very hard to keep up. This phase thing, it's a little dated at this point, but I will say that there's still a tremendous amount of relevance when we look here at phase 2, and I think this is important to remember as we look at everything else we're going to talk about today, that so many customers are right here, where virtualization has become business production, it has become de facto, and that's what we're needing to operate within. We still have a ton of customers that are moving outward toward the ideas of IT as a service, but what we do today is going to prepare them for that next step. And there's really two paths. One path is through the ideas of managed virtualization. The other is through the presence and adoption of cloud or SPI computing. We're going to touch on both of those today, probably with a little more focus on the managed virtualization side, because it is more of an on-prem type of conversation. But we are going to be touching on cloud as well and kind of how that integrates. Either of these will bring customers from where they are today to where they want to go with the fundamental precepts of IT as a service, right? True cloud preparedness, where IT is a broker of services, not just somebody that reacts to demand. Software-defined data center comes in two form factors when we talk about VMware. One is on-prem, where you're talking about vCloud Suite, vSphere with operations management, or as we lovingly refer to it, all of us as vSOM, and all of the other products that integrate therein. The other form factor for software-defined data center is off-prem. And there we're talking about vCloud hybrid service. The upshot is when we talk about these two form factors, that they integrate seamlessly, because vCloud hybrid service is vSphere. It's a data center for rent. It's vSphere in our data centers where your customers can attach in via subscription and be able to extend and seamlessly manage their primary and off-premise data centers together. And we'll be talking about the other services that go along with VCHS so you can kind of get a clearer picture of how you can integrate these into your conversations. So first, let's look at compute virtualization. I would say inarguably probably the most prevalent in every customer conversation, so this is where we're going to spend the lion's share of our time today. All of us have, attached and adopted, and we've used for our customers vSphere. And vSphere has been out there. It's been battle tested, trench proven. Everybody's doing it. If you're talking about anybody inside of the Fortune 100, everybody's leveraging vSphere. Everybody's leveraging vCenter, all the way down from Fortune 10 companies down to mom and pop shops, and they're managing it through vCenter. I would ask all of you to kind of, think about this for a moment. When was the last time you went to the doctor and, the doctor said, well, here's some medicine. You ask, how much should I take? And he says, I don't know, just keep taking it until you feel better. Yeah, I don't think that's happened to any of us. If it has, find a new doctor. Or how many of us have driven a car, at least after high school, without any gauges? And you can do it, sure. But it's always going to be kind of a crapshoot whether or not you're going to make it, to where you need to be without having to, coast into a gas station. A lot of people have approached their data center the same way. They've said, okay, well, I need to do virtualization. I need to do this. So I'm just going to buy what I think I need and call up and tell them what I think I need, and then we'll see how that goes. Well, the problem is you're just throwing cure at a problem without being able to meter it or manage it. This is where the idea behind vSphere's operations management, or vSOM, comes into play, where we're able to look at the health, right, in real time, based upon dynamic data that is learning as it goes, and then evaluate the risk and efficiency of that environment to determine where we can make improvements and what those improvements are going to do to future risk. Obviously, the hotter something runs, the more at risk it is. So how can we create a balance between those? This is where vSOM becomes of utmost importance. If we look, those of you out there that are playing, a conference called Bingo can go ahead and check off the word single pane of glass. as I always say. But I think that it really becomes true. And those of you who have seen and worked inside of vSphere, vCenter Operations Manager understand the value. Like I said, we have the ability to look at health, to then make adjustments to efficiency, and align that efficiency to the potential risk that those efficiencies are going to cause. And all of this is based upon relational mapping, learned in real time, and ordered by both current processes as well as anomalies that exist inside of the environment, giving us the ability to look at immediate problems, future problems, as well as create those points of optimization. So here's what vSphere with Operations Management looks like in action. This is running inside of my environment. You can see here that red bad, green good. I click the red button and I see what is that attached to. I can then drop into any item on this heat map, double click into it, quite literally, and it's going to open up an operations tab and show me what that object is going through. In this case, that particular object was an entire data center. And I can see what the memory consumptions are. I can drill down per VM, per host, whatever's necessary. And this gives us the capacity to start to apply the correct cure into the environment. So when we're talking to our customers about the value of migrating away from just vSphere and to think about vSphere with Operations Management, this is the type of functionality we're giving them. We're giving them the ability to look at all of their environment in a prescriptive way from the top down, as granular as they want to get. This is exceptionally compelling, and I encourage any of you, feel free to take the video that's provided to you, and you can capture this this bit of video and take it out with you on a USB stick and show it at your next executive meeting. Be able to explain to them, this is what you're going to have the capacity to do. Not just look at the environment, but to really understand it, to provide analysis, and to be able to generate reporting and configuration data based upon where you are. In addition, when we look at the functionalities and the things that come with upgrade capabilities and the things that happen in the different editions, I wanted to call out a few that are very special so that you can be sure to communicate these effectively. A lot of you have talked about and understand the idea of high availability. A lot of you haven't necessarily looked at or understand the precepts behind application high availability. This means that we can take, some of the most common, packaged applications, things like Exchange, SQL, Oracle, SharePoint, and inside of the virtual machine, AppHA is able to determine, one, if there's a failure, two, if that failure can be easily remediated by restarting the application, and if not, then let's restart that application on top of a different operating system. So we're not talking about a host failure. We're talking about the failure of an application. Now, we integrate this with the ideas of Hyperion and operations management, and you're getting a truly holistic solution that's not only able to predict and analyze, but also take action upon what might be wrong inside of the environment. Additionally, we've made so many tremendous enhancements to vSphere replication. Being able to go beyond just non-shared storage between hosts, to now be able to support multiple point-in-time copies, and to be able to have new support for storage vMotion. This means that customers that aren't ready to delve into storage area networks still have a solution, and you can still provide them something that is germane to their business case. So when we look at vSphere with Operations Management, we need to look at, what is, the right edition. Now, we're talking here outside of the Essentials kits, and I'll tell you why, because we're going to look at the Essentials kits very specifically here in a few minutes. But if we look inside of the standards, we realize that probably the biggest, for me, I've never been a huge advocate, quite honestly, of the enterprise move. I think that at the end of the day, it really boils down to standard and enterprise plus. Because inside of enterprise, the core functionality that you're going to gain is distributed resource scheduling, the ability to load balance VMs across hosts. But for the next move up, if they're ready to start talking about load balancing, I think the conversation really needs to migrate toward Enterprise Plus, where you're talking about building in policy-based automation. You have, DRS, you have I/O controls, et cetera. Not to mention things like distributed switching and more. I like to consider that, inside of standard, that, my kind of go-to ideal is if they have kind of it's less than 30 servers. And this would be either 30 physical servers getting ready to move to 30 virtual servers, or just 30 virtual servers, right? Whatever that is. So when I say server, I mean workload, not actually 30 hosts. 30 hosts would be, I think, entirely too many to try to manage with just standard, and for a lot of reasons. So let's just call it 30 workloads. We get up around 100 workloads, and I think that there's really no good reason to not talk about Enterprise Plus. We were talking about vCenter Operations Management and how that fits in. And what I showed you was VCOps Standard. So what I'd like to show you, what we'd like to talk about, is also vCenter Operations Manager Advanced. So the question is, what's so advanced about advanced? What do you get? So some of the things you get custom dashboards and reporting, and the ability to create your own integrations inside of the space. You get the ability to integrate vCenter Operations Manager with third-party APIs. So for things like networking, load balancing, and storage, and to be able to integrate and feed that data. You can even integrate System Center Operations Manager into vCenter Operations. In fact, that is probably our greatest number of hooks, which is pretty outstanding. Additionally, customers that are looking at end-user computing can integrate end-user compute into this and get operational compliance views and also relationship viewing that is dynamic and something that they can build out on their own. In addition to things like data store space and performance and latency. This is what happens when you move up to vCenter Operations Manager Advanced. So when we look at the customer's total journey, there's a real compelling story for being able to move them through all of this. Like I said, licensing kind of impedes or enables architecture. So if we look at where we are with things like Essentials and Essentials Plus all the way up to Enterprise Plus, some real important things that I want to call out. Inside of Enterprise Plus, and as you move away from just Essentials, look at all of the stuff that happens. Talking about distributed switching, talking about resource scheduling across storage, things like application high availability, distributed resource scheduling, storage vMotion, high availability, vMotion, vSphere replication. All of this starts to kick in as we move away from those, core beginner packages. If we had to assign these to somebody, I would say that Essentials Plus is great for a growing environment. They're realizing the benefit of virtualization. They need some of the ability to, protect and create some availability inside of their environment without necessarily adding more physical systems. And maybe they don't have a storage area network right now. That's a great time to go back to our install base and talk to them about Essentials Plus. We get up to standard, we're talking about SAN optimization, security. They're being able to look at different types of replication and, vMotion. Maybe they have different ideas about where they want to go. And they're getting ready to start creating, senses of security and balance across their storage plane. And they need the ability to change things on the fly. And then you get up around Enterprise and Enterprise Plus. Usually my rule of thumb is if we're talking about greater than or equal to about 6 hosts, I think it should be part of the conversation. as well as getting them the ability to be ready for the cloud and to have higher levels of maintenance and control. And remember, you can upgrade from anything to anything. You can go from vSphere, any version of vSphere, to any equal or higher version of vSOM, and then from any version of vSphere or vSOM to any version of vCloud Suite. Because at the end of the day, vCloud Suite, even standard, is based upon vSphere Enterprise Plus. So you can go from Enterprise Plus vSOM right into vCloud Suite standard. So what have we done? If we look back at our whiteboard, by integrating the correct version of vSphere and or vSOM, we've been able to go and provide prescriptive analysis for the environment. They can now monitor and measure and apply the right solution to the environment in real time. And additionally, that's going to give them some scope when it comes time to talk about their next point of x86 procurement or refresh. And that also puts you in a better position when you're talking to them about that refresh. You can become that trusted advisor that tells them, hey, let's do a health check on your environment. Let's drop in there, see where you are, see what your potential risk and time remaining is on the environment, and then let's align you with the correct x86 compute resources to keep you going. So now if we look at software-defined storage, taking the same fundamental ideas that we did inside of compute and expanding it out. Some of you have heard about virtual SAN. Those of you that haven't, I'll give you a very quick rundown. The idea is simple. The ability to capitalize upon the localized storage that exists on the compute. So very simply, you've got a server. The server's got some storage in it. How do we capitalize upon that? I guarantee you there's a lot of customers that are sitting out there that we've all touched that have storage that's just lying about. I like to call it errant storage. It's not doing anything. So with some very fundamental basics, we're able to operate into the hypervisor, again, like we do with everything else, and be able to take that storage and pool it into a virtual SAN shared data store. And then that shared data store comes, kind of purpose-built for the next-gen type of workloads, things like cloud, things like virtual desktop, read optimization. And it runs on any standard x86 server. And a very important point to remember, there's no additional appliance. It's just a license. All you do is license virtual SAN, and then you've got it. You don't have to, apply a bunch of other overhead. There's not a big learning curve. It's pretty straightforward stuff. And it allows for a really beautiful way to scale out and up because it does so exceptionally granularly. You can do it with just one more host. You can add 2, 3 more hosts, up to a maximum of 32 as it grows. And that can give you, a tremendously performant environment, all the way from kind of pokey little puppy just getting started, getting away from just localized storage and some basic vSphere replication, all the way into beginning virtual SAN, up into larger scale environments capable of supporting over 4 petabytes of data. So there's a large swath that you can cover when you're talking about this with your customers. And pricing is available either a la carte and standalone, or also inside of bundles. We've got bundles within Horizon especially, which is perfect if customers want a turnkey solution that includes compute, storage, management layer, the whole thing. They can include vSAN in that with Horizon Advanced and be able to have one solution that is kind of all they need for their end user computing platform. So now with the integration of virtual SAN, what have we done? So we included vCops, which gave us the ability to monitor and measure and to be able to prescriptively align our compute resources with what we need. And we did that through vCops and vSphere with Operations Management, or vSOM. And now with vSAN, we're able to capitalize upon the localized storage of that compute stack, as well as integrate with what else they have going on inside of their storage environments by giving them another means to provide storage to specific workloads. So now if we're to look outward into the ideas of network virtualization, again, all of this kind of wraps back into the fundamentals of the software-defined data center. The thing that has been blocking the ideas of software-defined networking for a number of years have been the fact that we've always been bound to physical networking hardware. When we talk about routers, switches, cables, things like that, that's the stuff that's never been able to move. And so it didn't really matter as advanced as we could imagine we could get. We could spin up VMs, linked clones, all this kind of fun, groovy stuff, but we were never able to do it as fast as we wanted because we still had to deal with the operations of routing, switching, static routes, firewall rules, all of this stuff, both in and out of the data center and across the data center. The precept of software-defined networking says that if we can uncouple that and be able to commoditize the hardware, the same way we did for the compute layer, then we can create a network abstraction layer, the same way we did with the compute abstraction. So imagine you have, for compute, ESXi and vSphere. Now, for networking, we talk about integrating NSX. So how does NSX build out? So here's the idea. You walk into a data center, you've got an existing network. Network sitting there, and it's going to have stuff plugged into it. I guarantee you it doesn't look quite disorganized. And then around it, you've got compute capacity. So you've got the compute capacity that's attaching to that network. So what have we done today? Well, today, inside of all of those servers, we've got a hypervisor, and that hypervisor has some basic networking that kind of comes right along with it to allow the virtual machines to talk. That's where we are today. So every time you've enabled a customer with vSphere, this is what they have the minute they open the box, even the most basic version. But what does a network hypervisor mean? What that means is we're putting a layer above that to be able to span across entire data centers and to do the exact same thing that we were able to do for compute, but now we can do it for network. And by the same exact thing, I'm talking about being able to create virtual networks, to create snapshots, clones, to be able to spin up and down virtual networks with machines attached to them at the click of a button, to be able to do it on demand. These are the ideas and the fundamentals behind VMware's vision of software-defined networking. So if we think it's the exact same thing that we did for compute, but we're doing it at the network layer, and we're doing it, again, with the same physical hardware. This still means that you're going to have great networking, bones in the environment. Because obviously, you can run vSphere on a laptop, but I don't know that I'd necessarily build a business upon it, right? So the more effective the hardware is, the same as it is in the compute environment, the more effective and performant the network is going to be. So now we've used VCOps and vSOM to give us a sense of the environment, to be able to be prescriptive and to forecast and understand what's going on in the environment. We used virtual SAN to be able to capitalize and integrate with the existing storage and what else they have going on inside of their data center. And we utilized NSX, as well as things like vCloud networking and security, to integrate the networking components. So now we've wrapped all of this up. So what else do we have, right? We've still got this nebulous, cloud out there. So as I mentioned very early on, cloud comes in two forms. You've got your on-premise and your off-premise. On-premise, we're talking about vCloud Suite. And we're not going to spend too much time on this, but just remember, vCloud Suite at its base level, vCloud Suite standard, is still built upon vSphere Enterprise Plus. So you can migrate from any version of vSphere or vSOM into any version of vCloud Suite. And they're going to be talking about leveraging cloud automation, vCenter Operations Manager, and like I said, all of those tremendous functions that exist inside of Enterprise Plus. So they're really becoming cloud ready. The goal behind the on-prem cloud is really about true flexibility. Being able to take all of the bits that we have within the data center and be able to integrate not only with our own services, things like vCloud Hybrid Service, etc., but also to be able to integrate agnostically across any hypervisor we want to be able to integrate agnostically across any cloud service provider that we want to. When you're talking about vCloud suites and the functionality that exists inside of our cloud automation offerings, this is very important because although a customer is going to have a lot of VMware inside of their environment, our goal is to leverage their existing investments and be able to expand the ecosystem without it being a rip and replace and all one solution. This is about integrating with what they have and making the best use of it. When you do expand out into vCloud Hybrid Service, as I mentioned before, it's important to remember the simplest ideal for vCloud Hybrid Service is to remember it's just a data center for rent. That's it. It's running vSphere. You can connect to it, and we can create seamless integration between networking points. That means you can have machines that can talk across the same IP range, whether it is on-prem or out in the cloud. You can create stretched type of architectures where you have one virtual machine out in the cloud and one back in the data center, and they're able to communicate with each other. And you can also move workloads in and out to provide for things like unexpected bursting. To give you an example, maybe like a college. They need additional capability, but only during certain periods of the year. It's a great time to talk about things like vCloud Hybrid Service and be able to integrate that inside of their data center. And it's all done just via subscription. Also, inside of the offerings for vCloud Hybrid Service, it's important to remember vCloud Hybrid Service DR to the cloud, or like I like to refer to it as DR2C. So DR to the cloud gives them a warm standby where we can replicate virtual machines from their physical site out to one of our vCloud Hybrid Service targets. So for your customers who don't have a recovery solution, and maybe they don't have a big spend for a second site, this is the conversation to have. This is how we get them to be safe and to move them to where they need to be, and also further align ourselves as trusted advisors with their business goals in mind. vCloud Hybrid Service comes in some pretty basic packages. So inside of VCHS, there's two offerings, dedicated or private cloud. And I'm not going to read through all this. You all get the idea. The fundamental difference is dedicated cloud is physical isolation, right? You're talking about actual physical systems. Virtual private cloud is a logical isolation. So we're talking about carving up resources the way we would inside of vSphere. So depending upon the SLA and the requirements aligned for a specific workload, we give you the option of determining what you need to do from either dedicated or virtual private cloud. And we've been adding even more to it all the time, including the ability to have more than just solid state disks. We can now include spinning disks so that you can change the type of cost and tiered storage that you offer inside of your cloud as well. DR to the cloud, and it's very important to remember, this is a separate instance. This isn't the same thing as VCHS. It's running atop vCloud Hybrid Service, but it would be a different subscription because they can't just go and turn on those machines like they can inside of their hybrid cloud instance. That little lightning bolt in the cloud means that that site is ready for DR to the cloud. And again, you can see over here, these are the core subscriptions, and we offer you to be able to offer anything a la carte as you go. If you want more supported tests, more storage, more memory, whatever's required to provide the correct level of disaster recovery. So now we've got all this. We've got vSOM. We've got virtual SAN. We've got NSX. We've got all of these bits in play, allowing us to optimize, expand, create extensibility, integration inside of the data center. And we're also able to extend that out into the cloud with things like vCloud Hybrid Service and DR to the cloud. So now that we know what it does for our customers, what are some great ways to think about motioning it? So start with the basics. vSOM, vSphere, and vCenter Server 5.5 are purchasing options. So one, you've got your fundamental additions, per CPU licenses, and you can scale them as needed. We also have our kits. We've got the Essentials kit, which gives you 6 CPUs, and then we've got the Essentials Plus kit, also with 6 CPUs. We're going to spend a little time talking about what the actual architectural differences and implications are of picking one over the other as well. And then we move up talking about the vSphere with operations management acceleration kits, which effectively kind of gives you a dotted line into vSOM. So there's a couple key ways that you can position vSphere and vSOM with your customers. I think you're all pretty familiar with this. So I believe, and I've said this before, that licensing decisions have architectural impact. So what we're looking at here is, kind of two sides, A and B. If we were to consider just the 6 CPU, Essentials versus Essentials Plus kit, so Essentials kit versus Essentials Plus kit, what would this mean as far as systems to actually replicate functionality? Well, inside of the Essentials space, you have the core software, which would give you Essentials Plus, and I give you the licenses that you need for those 3 hosts, assuming that they each have, 2 processors each. But then you're not going to have any high availability. So that means if you need to take a host offline, you're probably going to need to move them physically. Or if you want to be able to withstand the loss of a host, you might even have to add another host into the mix. So if we say conservatively that the addition of another host, heck, probably even a used host, something they could get off eBay, right, as cheap as they could get. And believe me, I was one of those, eBay trollers in my day when I was doing IT admin. So let's say it costs them another $2,500 to throw just some piece of metal in there that'll cover them in case they have a disaster. Now, they're going to need to try to move the machines around somehow. So I looked around, and about the cheapest, shared storage I could find was, plus or minus around $4,000. And again, I'm thinking also including things like eBay into the mix. Now, they've got these machines. They've got them, they've got some shared storage. They can kind of move them, manually, as kind of a click and drag kind of thing. Open up the file and dig into the storage and do what they need to do. But now they got to talk about protecting it, and these point-in-time copies and all this sort of thing. So they're going to have to go out and they're going to have to purchase a data protection solution. So one of some of the more popular ones out there, like I said, basic, I'm coming up with about $2,400. So the way I see it, that puts the capital expenditure total at a little over $9,500. Now, this does not include the additional operational expenses. And we have to remember operational expenses when we're talking about architectural implications. Because Just because you have shared storage doesn't mean the VMware guy or the virtualization guy knows how to use it. I myself was never a storage area network specialist. And those guys that I did know that weren't typically virtualization specialists. So it's kind of, never the twain shall meet kind of a thing. But today we're just talking about the capital expenses. But if we look at the Essentials Plus kit, yeah, it's got a much heftier price tag when you talk about core software for the same 6 CPUs. But when you think about the fact that you're not going to need maintenance compute because you have HA, that you're not going to need shared storage because you're getting vSphere replication, that you're not going to need an additional third-party data protection solution because you're getting vSphere data protection. Not to mention the fact that you're also getting vShield endpoint, so the ability to integrate and offload your antivirus, which is something that isn't even included on the other side. Didn't even bring that up. And the ability to get vCenter Operations Manager Foundation so they can start to get a little bit of insight into their environment. You're talking about a tremendous delta in the favor of Essentials Plus. So when we're talking to customers on the phone, I think it's incredibly important and part of our alignment as trusted advisors to not just look at what they say they want, but also what they're saying that they need. And this was one thing that, as I kind of penned this out and looked at it, it was kind of hard to argue with, at least for me. And to say, well, if we're able to do this and we're able to provide this to customers and to be able to say, look, these are the other things you're going to need to kind of replicate the same thing that you're going to get if you just move toward this kit. I think that gives us, a great point to start further conversations. And at the very least, to be able to give them something to plan for. Now, Essentials Plus is far more than just a pretty face. In fact, I know the professional staff and engineers here at Tech Data actually have. I'll go ahead and say that I kind of stole this idea from my conversation, with him here a while back. It's a great option to look at when you're talking about customers that are new to disaster recovery. And, maybe they've got, their primary site and they've got their secondary site and they're leveraging Essentials Plus. Why does it make it so, easy to integrate it with things like site recovery? Well, because in the event of an emergency and you push that, that big red button, you've already got vSphere replication in play because that's part of Essentials Plus. And Site Recovery Manager integrates with vSphere replication. So you don't even have to have the same type of storage at point A and point B. We're able to leverage different types of storage and still provide levels of disaster recovery. So we've got all of these different tiers. You could service them with DR to the cloud. You could service them by leveraging Essentials Plus and vSphere replication inside of that space as well. So there's a lot of different things we can do if we just look at the functionalities of the different additions. So like I said, getting down to the motions for vSOM. So big one, server refresh, licensing renewal. Right? I'm not even going to get into the increases and decreases in cost because, in my opinion, that's all subjective. But at the end of the day, what do we listen for? Where do we need to attach and talk about these things? So if we're talking about a server refresh or they're needing to go back for license renewal, I think we need to talk about vSOM. How many servers are they going to need? Well, they may think they know, but do they know? If they had vCenter Operations Management in play, they would know. If they're talking about storage or infrastructure optimization, right? We think we need more storage. We think we're running out of space. We don't know how much longer we have. We're under the gun. At this point in the conversation today, I think all of you could resoundingly shout, well, vCenter Operations Manager would be able to tell you that. And then if we talk about things like business critical applications, to be able to see potential problems, even in the standard editions, right? Like we said, if we don't include even the ideas of application high availability, but just the ability to have insight into the environment, that alone is worth the price of admission when we talk about vSphere with operations management. Or maybe your customer says, we have to face some budget cuts. Well, even though it seems kind of counterintuitive to face a budget cut with a capital expense, you as professionals would be able to easily position this because it does make sense. If they're having to cut into their IT spend, one of the best places for them to invest is in automation that will allow them to do so and maintain that decision effectively. Like I said, inside of all of our editions, we have these tremendous changes in functionality. And so if we look at vSOM and we look at vCloud Suite, we talk about pulling out the things that are the most important. Like I said, everything inside of vCloud Suite is built upon Enterprise Plus. And Enterprise Plus, and I can't harp on this enough, is paramount for you to remember all of the functionality that people get when they talk about Enterprise Plus. So if you've got a customer who's talking about greater than that 6 hosts, or greater than or equal to like 100 workloads or thereabouts, it needs to be a conversation about Enterprise Plus, even if it's not vCloud, but it's just vSOM Enterprise Plus, because you're going to be talking about storage and network I/O controls, to be able to the ability to auto deploy hosts, the ability to integrate things like application high availability. Not to mention, probably the one thing that is, like I said, worth the price of the ticket into Enterprise Plus, which is the distributed switch. That in and of itself is a tremendous value. Knowing that you can manage the networking of the hosts one time, one place across as many hosts as you want. This isn't even NSX, folks. This is just basic distributed switching. The ability to just manage one switch across an entire data center and to not have to worry, did somebody type the name right? Did they, make sure to plug this in or that in? That they've got one switch that they can manage across them all. That's a fundamental reason why I say anything greater than 6, we need to talk about Enterprise Plus. So now, growing out of Essentials, how do we help customers? So customers, are going to start with things like Essentials. There's a couple routes out. One is, they can go into, Essentials Plus, right? The other option is they can go into a vSOM acceleration kit. Okay, and this goes back to our, our other conversation. And that's available, either standard Enterprise or Enterprise Plus. If they're in Essentials Plus, they can also go into the vSOM acceleration kit. So this kind of gives you a way to kind of understand how to grow them out. And this isn't to say that I'm encouraging you to say, well, no, Essentials is just bad. No, it's not. There's a place for it. But I think that these things do get misunderstood, and we have to remember that there are implications to these decisions. And it's important to remember that the server hosts must be managed by the vCenter Server Essentials Edition that is provided with the bundle, right? So that those hosts have to be managed by that vCenter that they give them. So there is a bit of a binding there. Now, if we take that graphic and stretch it out, so now they're inside of this space. Where's the rest of the roadmap take us? Well, like I said, vSOM kind of creates that dotted line for you. Very, very rare, very exception-based circumstances. In fact, I would say I probably wouldn't even really think too hard about this. But, if you had a customer that was up into vSOM and there was just a compelling reason that they needed to migrate to vSphere, that's something that we can talk about, but it's not something that's done by policy. It's an exception case basis. But from any of those points, whether they're inside of vSphere or inside of vSOM, they can upgrade from any version of vSphere to any equal or higher version of vSOM, like we said earlier. And they can also migrate from any version of vSphere or vSOM to any version of vCloud, including vCloud Standard. So now if we look at this from left to right, we've created a really kind of cool map. If somebody starts at Essentials, they can move into, a vSOM acceleration kit, gives them the dotted line into vSOM, and then they can grow into vCloud. So we can see where these points of integration, these different types of functionality are going to grow with their environment. Of course, at the end of the day, you can also, go directly into any of these as well. And for the last time, upgrade from anything to anything, equal or higher inside of vSphere to vSOM, and then from any vSOM or vSphere into any vCloud suite. Guys, I want to say thank you for taking time with me today. I know this was a lot of information. And at the end of the day, the goal was not to master all of these different platforms, but more specifically to understand that when we're talking about the on-premise and off-premise data centers, that we have options, and that in every single call that we make, whether it's in the field on a whiteboard or it's on the phone with a customer wanting to, buy some vSphere or whatever it is, that we have to give some credence to our decisions and to listen to what the customer's saying, because their needs will often allow us to uncover opportunities to become trusted advisors and to place them where they need to be so that their infrastructure can grow in advance of their needs without them having to get kind of dragged behind the needs that they're going to have.